Hi friends, and welcome back to Julia at Home. If you are new here, hi, I'm Julia. I'm a homeschool mom of 4 this year. I have a preschooler, a kindergartner, a 4th grader, and a 6th grader. If you are not new, welcome back, and I know it's been a little while. I think I said in an update video in January that I actually got an additional part-time job in addition to homeschooling in my garden, and so it's been hard to balance, and the videos are kind of what's dropped out of my time. But I am not planning on going away. It's just going to be more sporadic, so bear with me. I'm going to share when I can. So I'm finally getting out my video on Victorian Britain. So this year for history, we are covering, or trying to cover, basically the 1800s. There's a lot of really interesting things that happened during this time period. So I've got a bunch of different things I'm covering in it, and I'm mostly doing it through units, but I'm also using Curiosity Chronicles, kind of like a spine. So the next few units that you see that I'll share for history will be during the 1800s, during this time period. This first unit is focused on Victorian Britain. So we're focused on, the British Isles and during the Queen Victoria's reign. So that was approximately from 1830 to 1900. And yeah, so that's what we're focused on in this video. I'm gonna go ahead and share the resources now. So I mentioned Curiosity Chronicles. Oh, there's trying not to have the glare there. This is Snapshots of Early Modern History, Volume 2. There's 2 volumes of Early Modern. They have, I think, Modern is going to be in 3 volumes. I have the first one, and I don't think 2 or 3 are out yet. But all of the ones for this unit are in here. We used several chapters for this. So chapter 65, which is Victoria Takes the Throne, and 66, which is the Rise of the Middle Class. There's also Culture Corners. So Culture Corners, if you don't know how this curriculum works, is it's like a little very short chapter that focuses on a bit of culture. So it's often like an artist, a musician, or something like that related to what you're learning about in the curriculum at that time. So Charles Dickens obviously was an author in Victorian Britain at that time. So, and photography was just getting started in this time period. It's really fascinating, actually. So we learned about that. And then we also got into imperialism a bit in this. This is the time period when, the British were obviously colonizing earlier, hence the United States, but went into India and such. So we did cover that. That's chapter 67, The Victorias Played the Great Game, and also chapter 68, which gets a little bit into the opium wars in China, the British smuggling opium into China. Then we also covered chapter 69 in here, which is Potatoes Rot in Ireland, which is the Irish potato famine. So lots of information in here that we did. We didn't read those all in one day. And actually, we like to listen to it on audio. You have, obviously, this is the print version, and I have this, and I'm reading along with it because it has great pictures and such to go along. But I really like that there's the digital audio version because it's written in dialogue, and it's much easier to listen to than it is for me to read it because it's different characters talking. So, and then I can kind of follow along as we go, and I really like it. So that's what we did in our book. And then of course I have other resources as well. As I said, this is called the Victorian time period because of Queen Victoria. And so we have who was Queen Victoria. Glare. And we enjoy these books for the most part. You could have, like, I don't even know what level this is, like maybe 2nd, 3rd grade level, maybe could read this. It's hard to know. The book level, the reading levels are hard. Both my 4th grader and 6th grader could easily read this book, but I just read it to them, and then we all listen together. I do have this. These are aimed at the 4th and 6th graders, and we did this in the fall. My preschooler and kindergarten are often around. They at the time were not really focused and paying attention though, so they might have gotten little snippets here and there, but this was aimed at the 4th and 6th graders. So yes, who was Queen Victoria? And I will link as many as possible in the description box below so you can check that out there. This is a really interesting book. This is What Jane Austen Ate and Charles Dickens Knew. And we did not read through this whole book. This is like, It's dense. It's a dense book, but it has some really interesting things. So as an adult, if you're really interested in this time period, I recommend picking it up. We just read kind of the introduction parts of it. So we read the basics, the sections on currency, the calendar, measurement, England, London, and then we got a little bit into society and etiquette and such. Yeah, but we didn't read the whole book because it's dense. So it was kind of just like an introduction to society at that time period. Then this is You Wouldn't Want to Be a Victorian Servant. Now, a lot of the people, you know, it's kind of fun to think of like the wealthier people and their fancy clothes and houses and everything. But most people during this time period in Britain were of the lower classes, right? That kept the things going. And so a servant would have been like a really respectable job for a young lady to have. So it seems like a good introduction to what a lot of people would have been like. And my kids really do enjoy these You Wouldn't Want to Be books. You'll see them in a bunch of my unit videos, especially history. They have a lot of great options for history books. So this is You Wouldn't Want to Be a Victorian Servant. If you have sensitive kids, this series might not be the best for you, but my kids really enjoy it. And a lot of kids like kind of icky things. As this pretty much applies always, but you know your own kids best. So I would, you know, look through it first. You can always, if you're reading it aloud to them, which I often am, you can leave out certain sections if you think they'll be upsetting. So you are the parent, it is your prerogative. Now, kind of unusual for me, I'm going to pause in the books to share a TV show, and this is one I actually just found on YouTube, and it's 24 Hours in the Past in the Victorian time period. I don't know when this show was made, but I had remembered it. I like watched it on my own for fun a while ago, and it was probably one of the best resources I found for like showing what life was like in Victorian Britain. And I think there's only 4 episodes if I'm remembering correctly. So I had my kids watch all 4 of them, not at once, like one at a time. And so basically they took some British celebrities. I didn't really know them well being in the United States. And again, I don't know how old this was. It's not super recent. But they took some British celebrities and they put them in a simulation of the past for 24 hours where they had to wear the clothes. They slept in like a location that was just like it was back in the time, and they had a particular job for each day. So the first one, they worked in a junkyard, which, you know, involves sorting through trash and muck and gross things. And then, let's see, the second one, I'm forgetting exactly in what order they went in, but there was a stagecoach inn where the stagecoaches would like stop and change over. And so some of them had to, you know, learn how to change over the horses, and some of them had to, you know, cook or clean and care for the customers that were coming in to stay at the inn at the time. And that was like really like there's a time crunch there for the stagecoach. And then there was the pottery factory, and that was really interesting. It also got into kind of like the social movements of the time, because a lot of the social movements for just better living conditions were just beginning. It's also really fascinating to see how pottery is made. I think it's similar to what they do today, to be honest. Hopefully with better wages and working conditions though. And then the last one was the workhouse, which was depressing and rough to watch. But we learned a ton, and I think it's appropriate for a broad range of ages, but you might want to screen it ahead of time. I think my kindergartner watched some of it with us and then she lost interest. But yeah, I thought it was fantastic. And so I wanted to bring it up now because it goes well with this. Like, we learned about the Victorian servant, and then we learned about like 3 and the workhouse, different jobs through that. And so after we watched that and read the Victorian servant book, I asked them to do a narration where they chose one of the jobs that a lower class person would have done and write from their perspective a day in the life. So that was a fun way to do a narration. I believe my son, my 4th grader, chose the pottery factory one, which was really interesting. I'm not 100% sure. I think my daughter chose the stagecoach inn. She loves horses, so she chose that one. Yeah, so I wanted to share that in there because, and I will find it and link it below because that was just a great resource. Okay, I've gone on long enough about that. When I'm doing a history unit, I really like to include people from that time period as well and kind of highlight a few of them. And so that's what these next couple of books are. This is on the Brontes. And you will have heard of some of their books. Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights are from two different Bronte sisters, and I'm forgetting which wrote which. But there were three sisters who were published authors. And then there's actually more. There was a sister that died. Or was there two sisters that died? Yeah, there's two sisters that died young. They actually, when they were sent away to school, they got sick and died there, which is really sad. And then there was a brother as well, which I didn't realize. And they all kind of died young, which is sad. But this book was just, it's really well done. So it's about the whole family. But the fact that at the time there were three female published authors in the same family is kind of incredible. And they worked together. They first wrote a poetry book. And they also first wrote under pseudonyms. So when their books first came out, they were by Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell were their pseudonyms. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I learned so much. There's like a little bit in the back, like on the different characters. So it was, I mean, kind of sad in that they didn't get to live longer and have fuller lives, but they're just very cool people in a story. Okay. Then we have Ada Lovelace. Ada Lovelace, Poet of Science by Diane Stanley. And she was basically one of the first computer programmers. Which is just, it's very cool. So she was a scientist and mathematician. I'll show you some of the pictures in here. And I'm not sure if I can fully explain well exactly what she did, but she worked with Charles Babbage, and he did this machine that later would become the computer. And she like wrote an essay that was published on how to work with it, basically. So he like made the first programmable computer, and she was the first to really show how to program it. And she also didn't really live to see like what would happen. And I would love to know what she thinks of what the world is like today based on what she did. But anyway, very fascinating person. Diane Stanley, I'm a fan of her books. This is illustrated by Jessie Hartland. So yes, I highly recommend this one. And then this last one that I have here on a person is on Charles Darwin, on the Origin of Species. And this one is actually less so like a biography and more so kind of a little bit about Charles Darwin and a little bit about his Origin of Species book, essay. I mean, I guess it was a book that was published. Obviously, this is about evolution, and I do teach evolution in our homeschool, but if you don't, then just skip this book. So you can see there's quotes here from Darwin. So that is Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species, adapted and illustrated by Sabina Radeva. There we go. So there's a lot more people you could cover. I mean, obviously we also had Queen Victoria earlier as a person. So yeah, I also had my children choose a person to then write a narration on as well. I also like to have a read aloud that's connected to our unit if possible. So my first thought, and I got this beautiful version, is Oliver Twist. I love these. These are like the Barnes & Noble Penguin, this is a Penguin Classics. But I don't know if it's different than the Barnes & Noble edition. Anyways, I really like these. These like canvas or something, really fancy covers. So I got this and I was gonna read it, and then I looked at it. Do you see those tiny words? I was like, at this point in my life with a 3-year-old running around, did not have the time to read this. So instead, we watched the movie, which I'd planned on doing anyway after we read it. We watched the musical movie, It's a really good musical. It, again, is sad at the end. I mean, this whole time period, Victorian Britain was like a sketchy place to be. Like, a lot of people didn't make it very far into life. Like, there's just a lot. Makes me glad I live today, basically. But it's a happy ending for Oliver himself, but other people don't do as well. So there's some scary parts that I had forgotten about one of the scary parts. So again, screen it. Luckily my kids were okay. So my kids are actually less sensitive than I am for the most part. So we're good to go there. But if you have more time, this is a fun book. Okay, so because we didn't do that one though, I had to find something else. And what I actually found was The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So Robert Louis Stevenson, we read Treasure Island earlier, but he was a Victorian British author. He was writing at that time. We read Treasure Island kind of imagines an earlier age of pirates, but it was written in the 1800s. And so, yes, so this takes place during Victorian Britain. There are so many variations on the Jekyll and Hyde story. I mean, they're all over the place. And one of my favorites is there's a musical composed by Frank Wildhorn that I saw. I'm guessing it was like early 2000s. And I really enjoy it. And I have the soundtrack and my kids have listened to it and really enjoy it. But it's not the same story. Like, so it's inspired by that. But this is... so there's like Dr. Jekyll is trying to basically cure mental illness and root out evil. And so he takes a thing that ends up separating the good and the evil in him, right? That's the premise. That kind of is the thread that carries through all of the interpretations. And that is obviously true to this. This is told from his lawyer's standpoint. His lawyer is narrating it. And it was really interesting, but it's a lot shorter and easier to read than Oliver. You could tell it's just thinner, and then the words are also bigger. And it had some black and white pictures in here, which are interesting. So yes, so we read this and my kids enjoyed it. I prefer the story in the musical because there's some romance and such. And there's not really any women. I mean, there's tangentially like maybe like a housekeeper in this one, but the musical has some romance, so I prefer that. Anyway, Jekyll and Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. And then this is one I got thinking I would read some of it. This is Edgar Allan Poe collection. So there's short stories that he did, and these are like the kind of classic Gothic, like Quoth the Raven Nevermore is from this. Telltale Heart. It's a classic one. I read several of these in high school, I believe. And it has Mask of the Red Death is another really famous one. And so I was just going to choose one or two to read. We were also doing this in the fall, so it's like a perfect Halloween kind of time read. And my oldest, who's currently in 6th grade, just got it as soon as I got this. She found it and she read most of them herself. And she really likes kind of scary Gothic things, and I am not a fan of really scary things. So I just let that be and let her read it and enjoy it. And yeah. I didn't end up reading it, but she enjoyed it, and this is another good addition. I like having it in our library. It's, you know, classic. The Secret Garden is another great one that you could do that I believe is around Victorian time period. It's the story of Mary. It's from a girl's point of view, and she grows up in India, and her parents die there from cholera, and then she has to come live with her uncle on an estate. And there's like ghosts and gardens, and it is also a beautiful musical that I know and love. So my kids have listened to that, and I think we'll probably read The Secret Garden at some point, but I chose not to at this point. But that's another great option for read aloud if you would like. Okay, some extras I want to mention. I have since 2020, when I was watching a lot more random YouTube, and I think this kind of boomed the fashion, like historical fashion, is fascinating. Like, it actually changed quite a bit decade by decade in the 1800s. It is wild. I mean, like the arms get big and the hoops get really big, and like there's different like the different years, like the arms grow and shrink and the hoops grow and shrink, and then they go out towards the back and narrow in the front and flatter in the, anyway. So it's fascinating. I will post some videos, I'll link some videos below of some YouTubers who cover some of the Victorian fashions. If you are interested like I am, my kids weren't really, but I liked to follow it, so I watched that. And if you have a book of centuries, which we do this year, that's something, often they have a page for each century for you to make sketches of things. So I haven't started doing a lot in there yet because I haven't had the time, but I would like to start adding some like fashion sketches in there. Okay, and then food. I always like to try to incorporate some food. I usually have a lot more ideas than I get to, and I love following Tasting History with Max Miller. Again, I'll link below. I also have his cookbook here. So some ideas of things that you can make from his channel. I will have all of these linked. Victorian cucumber ice cream, gruel, which goes well with Oliver, and Jane Austen's breakfast, which are like buns, which look delicious. I didn't actually get to making any of those things, but what I did make is we did this unit mostly in the fall, but then at Christmas time, we came back and did a Victorian themed like Christmas tea party. Because Christmas was a big deal in Victorian Britain. My understanding is that Prince Albert, who's Queen Victoria's husband, who was from the German states, brought over the tradition of the Christmas tree, and it was just a big deal in their family, and they, you know, got expanded to Britain and then the rest of the world, and was already German. So anyway, so we did a Christmas tea, and I made Christmas pudding. Which is in here. Let me find the actual page. The recipes in this book have information before the recipes. This one has a good like double page spread before the recipe with information on it. So here you go. So I went ahead and boiled the pudding and everything. The only thing is this recipe says calls for either suet or butter, and I wish I had found the suet. So I mean, it's harder, it's not as easy to find suet in the grocery store. I probably could have. We have some local cattle farms around here, which we're in Vermont. That might sound weird, but there's quite a bit in our area. And so if I had gone to one of their farm stands, they may have had suet, but I didn't think of far enough in advance. So I just used butter, and I would like to try it again with suet, to be honest. But I don't know, it was a lot of work, and I'm not sure it was worth the amount of work it took, but it was fascinating. Yeah. So it also had quite a bit of brandy, so it wasn't, I mean, I let my kids try some, they did not like it. It's not the most kid-friendly of desserts. We invited some friends over, like adult friends, not kid friends. So yes, but I think we had a good time. We also made orange pomanders, which are like the sticking, when you stick the cloves in the oranges, which is a really nice activity. My younger two actually really enjoyed doing that. It was like a really nice calming activity the three of us did together. And the Victorians loved doing things with fruit, so like any sort of fruit decorations they really enjoyed. So you could do that. Other activities you could do that I didn't fully get to were silhouette portraits. Those were really popular at the time. Also just making pictures with natural objects, so using like taking apart the pine cones or using shells and flower petals, things like that. They loved making things with that. One last resource I want to leave you with is, I think it's called Victorian Farm. There's this whole historic like farming series and offshoots of that, and that I think were BBC a while ago, and they're kind of calming to watch, actually. My kids didn't watch it with me, but I just love watching all those historic ones. So you can also look for a Victorian Farm, which I think would be a nice like counterpoint, because the 24 Hours in the Past was mostly city. I mean, not the Stagecoach Inn, and I feel like there would have been a lot of farmers as well during the time. So yeah, that's the last resource I'm going to leave you with. I'm sure there's a lot more out there. This is what we used. Hopefully you find it helpful. I hope you're all well, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon. Bye, friends.